Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville and the vice chair of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee, soon to be changed. With me today is my friend, my seatmate from the district right next door, one of the smartest members of the Senate, Brian Feldman, soon to be my chair. Welcome, Senator Feldman. Welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to kibitz today.
It's great to be here. I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time, and as I said, I think I've arrived, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. My new teammate, you be my seatmate, but now we're committee teammates.
There you go. Well, I am so looking forward to that. So I want to give folks who don't know you and your background as much some idea of how you got this, how you earned this position, and how our committee is going to work, because we are just going to have the best committee. So let's just start with, you are a Pittsburgh native, and as it is often said, Pittsburgh people, you know, within 3 minutes of meeting them that they are from Pittsburgh. What is so special about being from Pittsburgh? And tell us about your childhood, parents, siblings, and was anyone else in politics or policy?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh is unique. I mean, there's something in your DNA, even if you live in Maryland for forever. The reality is, most of us still, and I can't talk about it much in the General Assembly, Steeler fans, and there's a certain grit. When we talk about Southwest Pennsylvania in particular, it tends to be, white working class. I'll just, be unfiltered here. It's a particular. I grew up overlooking steel mills. Now it's a tech town. I mean, Pittsburgh is nothing like it was when I grew up. When I decided to move to the DC area, it's because there were not economic opportunities in Pittsburgh, and things have really changed. So I'm really happy for the city I was born and raised in, but I was drawn to the DC area by politics and the like. And yes, I did have some family in politics. I had an uncle who was a lawyer, represented the Pittsburgh public school teachers and
Nice.
negotiations, and he was always on television and that kind of thing. And then I grew up in an area, sort of a Jewishy part of Pittsburgh, and for those
Squirrel Hill?
correct. And so for those of you who know about the Tree of Life synagogue that was shot up a few years ago, I was actually bar mitzvahed at that very synagogue. So that's my bag. My parents didn't go to college, and so I was the first in the family to go to college, and so that's kind of a little bit of background.
And you have a sister who is also in Montgomery County.
Right. She actually lives in my district, District 15, which is a huge asset for me. I always perform better at her precincts than my own because kids went to Wooten High School and all that stuff. And I share Wooten High School, by the way, with Senator Cheryl Kagan. But
Yeah.
yes, my sister sort of was living in Princeton. She had moved from Pittsburgh and kind of followed me down to the DC area, to Montgomery County, to my district, so that we could be together. And so, yes, I have one younger sister who lives
Yes.
in 15, who
So
works for the Montgomery County Public Schools, I should say. She's
nice.
a para-educator.
Yes. So you went to Penn State undergrad and University of Pittsburgh Law, so still doing the Pittsburgh thing. Came
Right.
to DC to work for the United States Department of Justice
Right.
for a long time, for like 13 years.
Right.
When did you decide to run for office, and why? Was it something that was in the back of your mind or front of mind for a long time, but you ran and were elected in 2002?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was, I think from my earliest age, I was influenced, I think, mostly by my lawyer uncle. And, I was sort of politically obsessed junkie from like as early, literally as I can remember. And so, yes, I was drawn to the DC area because there were lawyer jobs that didn't exist in Pittsburgh. And then the U.S. Justice Department was really a compelling place for lawyers early on in a career to get the exposure of litigation. And I was a litigator. Traveling around the United States of America, representing the United States of America in court was really cool for a young guy in his 20s. And so I got to see the country. But eventually, long distance litigation took a little bit of a toll. I had little kids
Yeah.
at that point and decided it was time to pivot, and I started to think about getting into the political sphere, getting involved in local politics. I myself, even when I was a DOJ lawyer, I did a part-time program at Johns Hopkins in DC on government, a program I later ended up actually teaching in.
Yeah.
But I did that part-time at Hopkins in DC. And that kind of put me on a path. And then later, honestly, when there was a seat opened up in the Maryland House of Delegates, it was a former, I know a friend of yours, Mark Shriver, of the Shriver Kennedy family. He ran for Congress, and there was an opportunity, and I decided to sort of roll the dice, and I was Hatch Act, so I was really kind of a tough under the Hatch Act. A DOJ lawyer can't run for partisan political office, and therefore I had to make some a life decision, a fork in the road, if you will, and took a shot at the House seat. It was an open seat, and it was back. It seems like a gazillion years ago, but
it was. So you served for a long time in the House of Delegates. You were on the Economic Matters Committee. You ultimately were parliamentarian. Worked on healthcare, consumer protection. You worked on important issues, technology, transportation. You've done so much over the years.
And for 5 years, the hardest job I had in the House of Delegates, though, was I was the chair of the Montgomery County House Delegate for five long years, and so that was a challenge, I must say.
I can't even imagine. I have never sought that role. I think that's really hard. So in 2013, you shifted to the Senate, were appointed to succeed Rob Garagiola, who ran for Congress unsuccessfully. And you have been vice chair of the Finance Committee. So talk about some of the things you've been able to accomplish and some of the bills you're most proud of.
Yeah, so finance has broad jurisdiction, although some of that jurisdiction is coming to the our new committee. But I've been, I would say, the last several years, the point person on two key issues: healthcare policy, where I've collaborated with Delegate Pena-Melnick on pretty much most of the innovative health insurance, bringing down our health insurance kind of uninsured rate down. I had a bill in that codified the provisions of the Affordable Care Act into Maryland law. And so we've done a lot on health insurance. At the beginning, we had about 12-13% uninsured in Maryland. Now we're down to under 6%. And that's only post ACA and through some innovative stuff we did in healthcare. And the other is energy policy, where in 2019, I was the sponsor of the Clean Energy Jobs Act of Maryland.
Let's just pause a second. ACA, the Affordable Care Act, just to be clear on that. We also have to give a shout out because you mentioned Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, the amazing delegate and human and leader from District 21, Prince George's County, who's now going to be our cross-file partner on many issues as the incoming chair, the new chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee in the House.
That's right. So yes, so the Affordable Care Act was, and I would say that after the Affordable Care Act, a lot of the action in the country at the state level was on healthcare. But I think that's shifted. But so that was it. And then the Clean Energy Jobs Act was a pretty remarkable bill that will take us to 50% renewable energy in Maryland by 2030. But I've dabbled just one or two other things. I would say metro funding. Delegate Mark Corman, by the way, is my former student at Johns Hopkins. I have two former Hopkins students who are now in elective office, Councilman Andrew Friedson and Delegate Mark Corman. And Mark Corman,
the best. Two of the best.
Yeah, Mark Corman and I put sort of the landmark bill together for dedicated funding for our metro system back in 2019 also. So those are, and also the ABLE Act, a lot of good stuff, but I would say—
the ABLE Act that helps parents of kids with disabilities.
So U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen laid a foundation for all 50 states to be able to create a tax-deferred program like we have 529 college savings plans. Unfortunately, for families that have kids with severe disabilities, these are children that are likely never go to college, but to be able to save for their future on a tax-deferred basis was something that Senator Van Hollen was able to open up for states. And then I put in the bill to set up the that kind of a mechanism in the state of Maryland, and I think it's really one of the best things I've ever done. So those are some of the issues that I've worked on over the last several years.
So we're going to get to our new committee, but let's just hit a couple of quick things. Cannabis, you are the guy on cannabis, and that is not going to be in our committee, but the voters did approve recreational access to cannabis. Why don't you just give a brief overview of what that will include and what legislation we should expect to see in 2023 now?
Right. I mean, I do have to remind people we've had cannabis in our state since the 2014 when we
well, it's been in our state for longer than that, but legally in our state.
Legal medical cannabis was authorized by statute in way back in 2014.
Yep.
It's a $500 million industry, and there's now 38 states. We were one of the first. Now 38 states have medical cannabis programs. In November, we did put on a ballot to get the voters of our state to weigh in on the subject of moving to adult use over 21 legalization, and that passed with about 67% of the vote. But that was simply a yes/no ballot question. We now have to go do the hard work. In fact, the last 2 years, the last 2 years, I've had actually straight up legalization bills that didn't require a referendum, but because of some of the negotiations between the House and Senate, we decided to go to a referendum first. And now we have to go down and put down the regulatory framework, and we have to do it in a way that can get, I think, product to the market relatively quickly. Otherwise, the biggest concern of states, now there are 18 states that have adult use legalization programs. The fact is, the illicit market comes in and will take up the marketplace if we don't produce some legislation relatively quickly. And that's really bad, because what happens in the illicit market is it's not only untaxed product, it's untested.
Yes.
And if you walk around New York City right now, which passed a legalization bill in 2021, you have unregulated food trucks running around Times Square selling untested product that is really so it's not just getting tax revenue, it's about public safety. So we have to do that, and we passed some criminal justice stuff this year in 2022, but the reality is the real action right now is about licensing, social equity, which this gets to be a relatively complicated issue. So that's going to be a high profile subject in the 2023 session, and we have a work group, a House Senate work group that I'm on, that is working on that right now.
And you'll keep working on that.
Yeah, and I'll make this point back even on the healthcare stuff. I mean, even though Senator Kagan and myself, we're going to be on a committee that doesn't have direct jurisdiction over some of the healthcare cannabis issues, I still plan to be involved. I've got some, health insurance bills. I'm working with Delegate Pena-Melnick, Chair Pena-Melnick, that will go back to the Finance Committee. So I'm not abandoning those issues, even though the focus is clearly going to be on the subjects that the two of us are going to be working on in the new committee.
Good.
And it is a new committee. It is a new committee. I know you want to get
so good. We're almost there. We're almost there. You have worked on consumer protection legislation in the past, and I just want to give you an opportunity, if you'd like. You and I have talked about Ticketmaster or other consumer protection issues. Anything you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, people are talking a lot about it these days because of, some of the high-profile ticket master issues. But the reality is, yes, I've had some bills in the ticket consumer protection area. It's unbelievable how sort of flawed when it comes to secondary markets. And early on, I got the first bill had to do with computer programs buying up all the tickets. We had a situation some years ago at what was then the Verizon Center where tickets 10 seconds after they went on the marketplace were bought up entirely by computer generated
bots, basically.
It was a anti-bots bill, and we passed a bill that would ban that in Maryland. Subsequently, the United States Congress borrowed I won't call it the Feldman bill, but the Feldman Maryland bill, and made it some national law. But then subsequently, in terms of transferability, disclosures, transparency, they're all really, really lacking. Fees get tacked on, and I know you're a prolific concert goer, but this is an area I think absolutely. Again, whether it's on our committee or not, I plan to be I'm working on some legislation. I'm hopeful that you'll be the co-sponsor with me. But in consumer protection in the ticket space, there's a lot of work to be done. So
Agreed. All right. So now let's talk about our new committee, because I am so thrilled that you are going to be my new chair. Let me give just a shout out to Chair Paul Pinsky that I've been honored to work with. And he's so smart and such an expert on education policy, environmental policy, and has been a thoughtful leader through climate and through the Kirwan Commission, which was the blueprint, the 10-year blueprint for Maryland's public schools. So he has been appointed, has accepted the nomination to be the head of the Maryland Energy Administration, and so is resigning from the Senate. And you are coming in as our new chair, and our committee has a new name and a bunch of new senators. So first off, let's talk about the new name and the jurisdiction. So do you want to do that?
Well, the biggest topic, and I alluded to this earlier, and I know we've talked about it. I think although health insurance and healthcare post-Affordable Care Act was the hot issue, I think post 2011, 12, whatever, if you look at what's happening in the United States Congress this year, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill from last year, the federal money investments in our nation going forward over the next several years is going to be in clean energy, climate, upgrading our grid. All those things are really important topics, maybe the most important subject in the country, and as it pertains to climate change and the environment. And so the Inflation Reduction Act has $370 billion flowing to the states.
Yeah.
And so it was important for this new committee to recruit me over, to be candid. Yes. I really thought it was important for this committee to have access and jurisdiction over a really, really hot topic, climate, environment. And I'll echo your point about Senator Pinsky. He's been really an iconic figure on education through the blueprint. Yes. And obviously the Climate Solutions Act bill that we passed in 2022, but he's not going away. He's going to the Maryland Energy Administration, which is also tied in to the fact that we're going to have jurisdiction, our new committee, over energy policy, every component of it. Yep. And that includes economic development, and the MEA, the Maryland Energy Administration, which Senator Pinsky is going to be heading. We're going to continue to work with him. He is going to be part of that federal dollars that are flowing to the states. Some of that's going to flow to the Maryland Energy Administration to dole out grants and all the rest. So he's still going to be part of the energy policy team, but that is going to be the biggest change between the old committee and this brand new committee that not only has new jurisdiction, but also new members. We've got some House members that came over. We've got some folks currently in the Senate coming over. And then you've got some people like myself and Senator Augustine coming from the Senate Finance Committee, which had energy policy, coming to the new committee. So I think it's a great mix.
Senator Augustine, President Pro Tem.
That's right. So we I'm bringing over with me.
He's bringing over the power. Yes, literally and figuratively.
A really smart guy, very knowledgeable about energy issues, and he's the newly anointed Senate President Pro Tem, and that I think is also I think relevant, important, that I think in terms of our overall juice level of our new committee. So I think it's all good.
And we're keeping, just for the record, we are keeping all three of our Republicans, Senator Simonaire, Senator Galley, and Senator Carrozza, and as well as really talented Democrats like Senator Mary Washington, Senator Katie Fry-Hester. I want to say we got one more. Anyway, so it's going to be,
we have new Karen Lewis Young coming from the House,
and Ben Brooks.
Ben Brooks and by the way, Ben Brooks was the chair of the Public Utilities Subcommittee over in the House Economic Matters Committee. So he's bringing some institutional knowledge on energy with him. Yep. Karen Lewis Young is very passionate about education policy. We've talked, and she's coming over. So it's a really excellent mix of different people from different parts of the state.
So EHEA, the current committee, Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. So we gave away health occupation. We had more bills than any other committee in the Senate of the four committees. And we also gave away alcohol. So do you want to speak to health occupations or alcohol?
Well, as you mentioned, in the House of Delegates, I only served on one committee, the House Economic Matters Committee, which had jurisdiction over alcohol bills. A lot of them were local alcohol bills, and I'll just say that those bills take up tremendous amount of time, and I didn't miss it when I left the House Economic Matters Committee. I think there are more. I think I like the mix of the jurisdiction of the new committee and sending the local alcohol bills and alcohol bills over to the Finance Committee. I haven't heard anybody complain about that on the new committee yet, but so that is a change. Obviously, I have been involved with healthcare and health insurance, not health occupation. That's something you probably can weigh in a little bit of whether that,
Yeah.
but you're right. Most of when we say that the former committee had the most bills of any, a lot of it was because of the local alcohol bills. In fact, there would be like a whole day or two devoted to one topic, just local alcohol bills and
alcohol day. Absolutely. I have to say that one of the things that we ought to brag about is the General Assembly has really cultivated and expanded local breweries, local wineries, local distilleries, and I have shown off. I guess I'm going to do this again. I did it with Kevin Addicts. So I have Old Bay vodka. I have Sagamore Rye. I have the my whiskey from Rockville. I have Baltimore's Epic, which is a whiskey. I have, so.
Well, I will say one thing.
Drink local, buy local, drink local.
Maybe this is too much information, but you were over at my home recently for a social gathering, and you really did give me a lecture about the fact that I didn't have any Maryland produced craft beers, and so that will never happen again. I know that if I have any kind of a party of any sort at my house, I will correct that misstep. And so yes, honestly, actually, I had a bill a few years ago changing our old 30-year-old franchise laws on local bill. It's from an economic development home.
No question.
I think it's a hot topic, and so I don't want to say that, but to make room for these really the future of our nation and world top issues, we had to make room somewhere. And if it's going to be alcohol, local bills, and the like, that's a sacrifice I think made off for the new committee.
So I want to hit just some of the other, we talked about energy, and certainly that's going to be a big driver, and your expertise is going to be amazing. We referenced the Kirwan Commission, the 10-year blueprint for Maryland's public schools. How do you think that's working? And is it premature to ask what your education priority or priorities might be? And then I'm going to ask the same question about non-energy with the environment.
Sure. Obviously the root of kind of everything starts with education. It's a bold investment we've made as a state, but it still is going to require involvement by the legislature. This is an area where you in particular, I think are going to play a big role, because I'm coming from the Finance Committee. I was not integrally involved in the blueprint and the legislation created. So I'm going to have to rely quite candidly on folks who've been in the middle of it, like yourself, to give me some ideas. So it's hugely important. Don't want to drop the ball, having made this massive commitment. But I know where my lane has been and where I need to get up to speed. You talked about folks not having some background on the committee on energy, and I was not in the middle of the blueprint. So that's why the committee's so good. We've got a nice mix of some folks with some legacy institutional knowledge on some topics, and then we've got some new fresh faces. So I think that will make the committee really, really strong, even though I'm going to look to you for sure on guidance on that.
We haven't talked about Ron Watson, and he's coming over from judicial proceedings, in addition to the two of you coming from the Finance Committee.
That's right. And so he's going to be a relatively new senator, but I've talked to him since the announcement. He's really excited. He's really excited about the new committee and the topics. As has been the case, I've talked to every member of the committee that's coming, and without exception, I say this candidly, I'm not just saying it because of the two of us talk. Every one of them is uber jazzed up and super, super excited about the possibilities.
Anything you want to mention about environmental legislation that is unrelated to clean energy? Anything on your mind?
The Climate Solutions Bill was a major generational, one of the most robust, ambitious bills in the nation. I think that what we're going to have to figure out as a committee, I suspect we're going to have some bills this session coming in to tweak and make already modifications. I mean, which is the case with most big bills, omnibus bills. You find that there's going to be some pushback. So we're going to have to find our way in the committee our own. This is a different committee with a different makeup, but it's also going to have its own vibe on environmental issues. And so I don't know where everybody is on some of these things, but I think we can expect in the 2023 sessions bills related to the 2022 Climate Solutions Act right off the bat.
Agreed.
And also, I just have to say, just on environmental policy generally, I alluded to earlier about the Inflation Reduction Act. It just ties into so much stuff here about the electrification of our grid and things like that, which are environmental, but it's hard to decouple. It's hard to decouple the environment from clean energy, and Congress has sort of recognized that. If you want to have everybody driving electric vehicles and you want to electrify every building, you have to have a grid that can handle it. And right now in the United States, we don't. So I think it's all sort of intertwined, quite frankly, and we're going to have to work through it.
Another E in our committee, education, energy, environment. Another E is elections. And as you know, we will continue to have election legislation in our domain. Any thoughts, anything you want to talk
about? You've been the lead in the Senate on most of those initiatives. And I know that you, in the aftermath of just this is topical. We just came through an election where it took us, I don't know, a month to figure out the results. And
as a result of Larry Hogan's ill-advised veto of one of my bills.
I think, as a starting point, I know that my understanding is that you'll be bringing in a bill to deal with that issue that the governor, for whatever reason, made no sense at the time, still makes no sense, vetoed it. So again, that's an area where you've been out front, and I think you're going to continue to be the lead on election law legislation. And so I think look forward to working with you on that bill, which I'm hopeful will be a relatively easy lift. And we didn't even talk about, we have a new governor, and how is that all going to work?
That is actually next on my list.
Good.
So you have a new home, as you referenced, and you and Janice have generously opened it for fundraisers and gatherings. And it's just a beautiful home. And among the many events that you've already hosted was one for Wes Moore and Aruna Miller, who are a governor-elect and lieutenant governor-elect. So talk about, just give us a sense of having people in your home all the time and becoming a gathering place, but then talk about your expectations for how you expect or believe or hope to be working with the new administration.
Well, as a starting point, some of the viewers may not know, but Aruna Miller, a new lieutenant governor, was actually my teammate for 8 years. She represented District 15 with me in the House. She was in the House of Delegates for 8 years, 2 terms. And so this is nothing against Boyd Rutherford, but I didn't have much of a relationship with him. I'm really, really excited to have a District 15 alum in the lieutenant governor spot. So we can, start with that. That's sort of a game changer just on a personal level. Sure. And I think it's going to be a really dynamic and engaged. I think when Governor-elect Moore was at my house, he said she's going to be the most consequential lieutenant governor in the United States of America, and I hope that is the case. So she brings a lot to the table, and she's still my constituent.
There you go, perfect.
But I think a lot of folks in the General Assembly have not served with a Democratic governor. And I served with Martin O'Malley. I know what it is different. It is different. I think we're not going to sit around in our committee or anywhere in the General Assembly thinking about, do we have veto override numbers? Do we have, you talked about your election bill. And so I think that frees up the legislature to sort of do what it wants to do. I mean, Governor Moore is not going to be a rubber stamp, but at the same time, we're not going to be a rubber stamp on what his goals are. We don't really, and so I think that first session is going to be a bit of a feeling out process. That relationship will be different. It's going to be really different for our presiding officers, who got used to being the top Democratic voices in the state of Maryland, and President Ferguson and Speaker Jones. But the fact is, when you have a governor of your party, that adjustment is going to change. So it's just the broad General Assembly. It's going to operate a little different. And that first session is going to be really, really interesting, but it's going to be really different than the last 8 years under Governor Hogan. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Sure. One last question before we pivot to Fast Five and wrap up. I need to give you a minute to brag about Matt and Becca. Your kids are wonderful and they do interesting things. So why don't you just give a moment about them?
Yeah. So my son lives in California, in Hollywood, California. And we have some family in the TV industry, so he went out to California to get into that world, and as a screenwriter and all the rest. And he ended up in his 20s. He started his own company, digital, and he's doing fantastic. He hires kids from everywhere from Eastern Europe. So he's in his 20s. He went to my kids went to the very same high school as Senator Cheryl Kagan, Winston Churchill
Yay,
High
Churchill
School.
Bulldogs. And
Winston
Senator
Churchill.
Susan Lee, our
Correct. So
other
we have two
neighbor.
Churchill grads in the state Senate, and the two Feldman kids also went there. So he's doing fantastic in California. And my daughter, and I was worried that my daughter Rebecca was going to follow him to California, but no, she lives in DC, and she works for the second largest marketing PR firm in the world, and she's doing great. And so yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Proud
Great.
papa.
Yep.
All right, Fast Five. Senator Brian Feldman, soon to be Chair Brian Feldman. 5 quick questions to help people get to know you a little better personally. Question number 1, what do you like best about being a dad?
Wow, that's a really open question. I think it's to see them develop. I mean, honestly, when I first ran, they were little, and now they're grown-ups. In fact, I even have a new daughter-in-law.
Yes.
And I think to see that
and grandchild.
No, I don't. No,
Oh, don't you have a baby?
no,
Okay, sorry.
no, that's not yet. But
Not yet. Sorry, Matt. No pressure.
Yeah, don't put pressure on that. So I think it's that seeing them, from babyhood to, and as I said, when the kids were little, I was traveling around the country litigating cases, and see them now as full-blown adults. It's really pretty remarkable, honestly,
Awesome.
journey. Yeah.
Question 2, favorite family vacation that you've ever taken?
Well, my daughter Becca, later went to this country, Italy. I love Italy. I've traveled a lot of places, but I loved our family trip to Italy, where we started in Venice and took trains through Florence, Rome, and down to the Amalfi Coast. And I can never get that family trip out of my head. That really was top of the food chain.
Nice. Question 3, what do you like doing in your free time, unrelated to law or policy making?
I'm a little bit of a gym rat, but I really I love walking. I would say I'm super endurance, long walker guy. It calms me. It provides some clarity in my brain,
Nice.
whether it's in Annapolis or back home. I love taking really, really, really long walks.
Good for you.
Yes.
Question number 4, because you're so fit and healthy, what is your favorite junk food?
Junk food. Well, I love junk food. I don't know how that to characterize junk food. So I love pizza. I'll just say this. Okay. I love pizza, anything with red sauce, and I love chocolate. I'm a total chocoholic, and I'd say anything with chocolate I will love. I don't
Except
think
for pizza.
Yeah. So forget the pizza thing. I'm a chocoholic. Anything with chocolate, I will never.
Milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate, any particular kind?
Anything with chocolate.
Okay, good for you. All right. Senator Brian Feldman, the 5th question, the one that I ask everyone. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Most people can't do. Okay, I'm just going to go back to my prior. I don't know many people that can. I walk like 10 miles. I literally I walk like 10 miles a day or something, and I don't think many people do that. I'm sure people can do it, choose not to do that. It's time consuming. It's that again, huge mega mile walker. I think that might be it.
All right, I'm going to correct you, and I never correct my guests. I think one of your superpowers, one of your many superpowers, is you are really powerful and effective on the Senate floor. You explain complicated legislation in simple, not demeaning, but simple, clear ways, and you change votes, and you educate folks in the press, in the general public, and among your colleagues. I just think you're extraordinary. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that my litigation world time, and that really comes in handy, I think, on the floor of our chamber.
Yeah.
frame issues and things like that. So I appreciate that compliment. And
Absolutely.
so,
Well, Senator Brian Feldman, I am so looking forward to serving with you, with working with you as my incoming chair of a new committee with talented new colleagues. And I just really want to thank you for taking time to kibitz today, especially while you are on vacation. It's kind of you to dress up and enjoy
yes,
today to chat.
we've got our beautiful dome right behind me, and I'm not there actually. I'm not in front of the dome. I just should disclose that in case anybody thinks I'm doing
About 3,000 miles from there, but
that's true. That's true. I am visiting my son. I should say that right now
yeah.
in California. But okay, well, thank you so much, Senator Kagan.
All the best to you, and Happy New Year. Here's to future great things. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.